Welcome to After the 80 Rugby League Ipswich edition. I'm your host, Terry Pascoe. On today's show, we'll review all the action from the last round of the Rugby League Ipswich competition. The chairman of the competition, David Nugent, will join the panel, as well as this week's player profile, Tyson Hornbuckle from North Tigers. Now, if you'd like to join the discussion, you can follow us on our social media sites, Facebook and Twitter. Just search After the 80 TV. You can also subscribe and download us as a video podcast through iTunes, so make sure you hit the subscribe button there. Now, joining me on the panel is Anthony Bomber-Briggs and our special guest, Chairman David Nugent. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Mate, how you found your year so far?
Challenging, yeah, always busy, but I'm really lucky I've got a great team that I work with, fellow board members and some experienced staff, so that certainly makes it easier.
Now, you obviously had your challenges this year straight away. I guess we'll go straight into the tough questions.
Yeah.
Goodna?
Yeah, we were right into the fire there, round two. We got a forfeit there on the Sunday, I think it was, on that weekend, and we were right into it. So that was a big test for us, but also a test for the young, inexperienced committee down there. So we've worked through that now, and we think we're on a path to better things for goodness. So.
Is it just having to also that they were testing yourself and seeing how strong you were? Because, I mean, not that it's ever happened in the Rugby League Ipswich team, but you've seen competitions that fold over to the clubs where you guys had, took your stance and said, this is the rules and this is what we're going to do. Yeah,
I think both organisations are probably guilty of probably being stubborn a little bit. I know that they dug their heels in on the principles that they believed in, as did we. So we had some rules that govern the player points index, and I know you've talked about this on the show before, but for your viewers, if they could put a team on the paddock that complied with those rules, well, that's fine. They thought that they should have been able to play some other players and exceed that player point cap and still take their place in our competition, and of course that's where we didn't agree. So they agree. They, I guess, should be commended for sticking to their principles. I guess they're probably a little bit naive in their knowledge of the rules and the impacts that might have had once they were found to actually breach those rules.
Is that something where it could have, in a sense, and this is outside looking in, that it could have been all avoided? I got an understanding, obviously, of the salary cap and the points index, but could this all have been avoided if, instead of sending the whole team down, that they just turned around and said, well, we'll just have one experienced player not play for us this week?
Yeah, and I think that's what they've done since. Last year, the same processes were employed, and they were able to manage quite well. In fact, with a 100-point cap, there are a number of games there where they took the field with 99 points worth of players, and they've been able to achieve that since. I think the success that they've had over the last couple of years has actually meant that they've attracted high calibre players to their organisation. Success breeds success, as you know, which meant that the proposition of juggling their player list within 100 points became more difficult. So it becomes harder to keep everybody engaged in the team environment where you have to sit a couple of blokes out. And some of those guys were high calibre players attracting a lot of points. So yeah, I can see where it became more challenging for them. But they've proven to us that they can actually, since that time, they've learnt to manage it a lot better. And they've taken the field ever since with under 100 points. So it can be done. It didn't apply, however, to their reserve grade team. You can have players that attract points play in the reserve grade competition the points moot, basically, because they don't apply. So I guess where that naivety that I talk about probably came about was they thought that perhaps we should forfeit the reserve grade game as well. And unfortunately, as the remainder of the year rolled on, that bit them in the backside a little bit, because they came very close to qualifying for the semi-finals and unfortunately just didn't get there in the end, and the 6 points would have made the difference.
Obviously, let's rewind it a bit and find a little bit more about yourself there. How did you get involved in rugby league? Were you a champion player back in your junior days?
No. I was a really weak cog in a very weak team at Sacred Heart Bevelle primary school days. We used to get our backsides handed to us quite frequently by East Ipswich State School and Brassel and these sort of guys. I remember going to Joyce Street there, the old home of Swifts, and there was a fellow, some of your viewers probably remember him, Scott Brown, of my vintage, your vintage bomber, who played in the local competition, went on to play for the Cowboys in Cronulla. Basically, like I say, we didn't do very well, and Scott was a big reason for that. They dominated the competition, the East Ipswich boys back in the day, and that was probably the under 11Bs back then. So yeah, I guess I went off on another pursuit. I played a bit of cricket and through my high school years and 20s and stuff. Around about when my first child came along, I just turned 30 and I answered an ad in the paper to volunteer for the Queensland Rugby League to be a finance director, a voluntary finance director on their Southern Division board. And that's the board that Brad Talon now leads. At the time, it was chaired by Peter Beatros, who's now a life member of the QRL, and worked with Peter there for a few years. They merged and they only had the need for one finance director, so I went back to the Ipswich Junior Rugby League, so we're talking probably 2007 now. Served there as a treasurer, became the chair when Brendan Bowers moved on, so on and so forth. So I've had some really fortunate experiences in rugby league in a voluntary sense. So I was able to help out at last year's Rugby League World Cup. That was quite an honour. So being a volunteer there and being on the field and making sure that Billy Slater's kids and Cameron Smith's kids didn't run into the presentation at the end of the game and that sort of stuff. That's some of the jobs that volunteers get. But I got a nice photo with Cam and the World Cup trophy at the end of it, so it made it all worthwhile. I guess one of my earliest and still one of my fondest memories was going to the North Ipswich Reserve with my late grandfather and my father, sitting in the car on the other side of the field, as you used to be able to do back in the day, so this early 80s, I suppose. Beeping the horn when Greg Quinn would score a try for the Jets, with Colonel Sanders on the front of his jersey like they used to have. So that still remains one of my fond memories. Listening to Gov Clark call the game over the public announcer over there, so some of those old names still remain with me as some of the fond memories, yeah.
Well, and finals coming up very shortly with at North Reserve, and obviously potentially having an Ipswich Stadium soon, but it's obviously early stages and we'll see how that goes. But let's continue on. We'll have a look. Like we said, all the competition is finished now. We'll start with the under-19s. Bomber, what are your thoughts about the competition?
Well, the 19s has been a very close competition all year. Most of the years, Brothers did run away with it. They won about the first 15 games there. They've fallen in a little bit of a rut till probably the last 5 weeks there. I think they've had 3 losses there. Goodness beaten them twice there. So going into the finals, obviously Darryl Squires, the coach of the side there, he's a very experienced coach, so obviously he'll have them obviously back on the line. Obviously Goodner have held around second position all year there. And then North and West End, they're the other two sides in the finals there. North have started to hit a little bit of form, and West End, they're a side that you just don't know who's going to turn up on the day. If they turn up with their best side, they'll probably win the competition, but whether they do is a different thing.
They're the defending premiers too, the Bulldogs, so they've got a lot to play for. They've got a lot of young fellas who've played first grade as well and over at the Jets in the 20s, so they've got a good bunch of kids to put a team together and can really make a run at this. Like you say, if the right team turns up on the day, anybody can win. So.
All right, well, before we have a look ahead too far of the finals, we'll have a look at the results from the weekend. Golden Point game. But it was a draw. Goodner and North 20 all, and a close contest there with East Cobras up against West End 24-22.
Well, actually, the East Cobras West End game, West End led that game 22-0. So it was obviously a tale of two halves there. They had an absolute blinder in the first half, and then I know they just shut up shop and the Cobras got over them. And obviously the Goodner North game, that's 2 versus 3. So if that's any indication on what we're going to get, we're going to have a great final series.
All right, now let's have a look at that competition ladder. I know you mentioned a little bit of it, Bomber, already, but it must be pleasing to see that there's such a tight competition in the under-19s. David, just looking at the point structure as it is, it was still hard fought until the last game, really. Oh,
look, for a fair while through the season, in all 3 of these competitions we'll see today, it was very, very tight. There was, in some cases, 6 teams competing for 4 spots to go into the finals. Fasterford could probably consider themselves a little unlucky. They had a great start to the year. They lost a few key players to injury, unfortunately. Lockie Postle and these sort of guys didn't play the full season for them, and unfortunately they weren't there when the whips were cracking. But there's a bit to work with there for next year for the Bombers.
All right. Now, there's also some interesting games in the reserve grade competition. Now, how has the reserve grade comp stacked up this year, Bomber?
Yeah, well, the reserve grade, it's been much the same as the 19s. Brothers have dominated that competition for most of the years. They've had a couple of hard games in the last couple of weeks there, and then North and Swifts, they've been thereabouts every week. It's hard to take a bit of a line sometimes because sometimes they get a few injuries. Swifts had a fair few injuries in A grade, so a lot of their reserve graders have gone up there. But now with Swifts nearing back to full strength, their finals chances do get a big boost.
Yeah, have you been impressed with Rosewood Roosters, David? With the
that's his
development
team. That's Terry's team.
That's Terry's team, is it?
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, well, I'd have to say yes. No, look, it's fantastic for these countrysides to compete against the big metropolitan teams like the Brothers in the north of the world. And, I think Rosewood punch above their weight. It's their first year back in. They haven't let themselves down at all. Their local community does really bind behind them. The Rosewood, John Street Rosewood is red and white basically as you drive down the heart of the township out there, and they really get behind them. They get to Anzac Park on Saturday nights and really support the boys. And having someone like Brendan Marshall out there as well, I think has really lifted some of the young fellas. Now Brendan's probably going to hang up the boots, which is a shame, but maybe they can hang on to him in a coaching sense. And some of those young fellas can come through from their 19s program and kick on for the Roosters.
As you say, it won't be long before we see him back in the top league?
That's entirely up to Rosewood. I mean, a lot of the bigger premier clubs have a very supportive lot of infrastructure around them, like an old boys association, a strong junior nursery to draw from, and these sort of things. The facility out there probably needs a little bit of work, so we'd have to work with our local council to make that of A-grade standard. But it's entirely up to them. If the town wants to get behind them, that's where they're going to draw their sponsors from. Anything's possible.
All right, let's have a look at some of the results from the last round of the competition. Finally, I guess after my riding their back most of the way, Rosewood actually get a win over Pascoe.
Yeah, well, actually, that was a good win. Pascoe were up in about second or third position on the ladder, and Rosewood obviously had nothing to play for other than the last game of the year there. And obviously, Josh Ryan was retiring, and that was his last game there. He's served both them clubs on a good basis, so obviously that was a good win for Rosewood. Goodna coming home hard, but obviously, as you'll see from the ladder there, they've just missed out, so the 6 points will be very costly for them.
All right, let's have a look at that competition ladder. And yeah, again, it's 1 point separating fourth versus fifth. And again, you must be impressed with the strength of the competition, David.
Yeah, I think a lot of credit has to go to the players and the coaches. Reserve grade is one of the toughest gigs going around. You've got players being drawn up to the top grade team. You've got young fellas that have graduated from the previous Colts programs, and you've got to meld them and bring them together and form a team. The ones at the top of the table are probably lucky that they've been able to hold on to a nucleus of players and build a strong spine and a strong forward pack, and then players come and go on the fringes. The guys at the bottom, like the Cobras and the West End guys, have probably unfortunately had to bear the brunt of their top grade teams not being successful and carrying a few injuries and players floating in and out. So that consistency goes a long way, particularly over 21 rounds of football. So.
All right, now let's have a look at, have a chat about the A-grade competition. It's finalised now, Bomber. Probably not the way Goodna wanted to play the season out, or not how they foresaw the competition going, but that was probably the only disappointment in the competition.
Yeah, well, we've seen Fassifern there. They lost their first 3 games. Now they're on a roll of about 15 straight wins there. Obviously, they got a few imports in there, which obviously they do every year out there, and obviously serves them well out there. Brothers and Swifts there, they've basically been battling out. Norths were there for a while there, but they dropped back into 4. But we've got 4 teams now that have qualified that are all genuine a chance on their day, as long as they do the right things. If the Norths do the right things on the day, they can challenge all them teams.
And look, you mentioned before about with Rosewood and how getting the right sponsorships and all that into the competition. I know with my chats with the BRL sides, it's come to a point where jersey sponsorships aren't enough. You're not getting enough money from the local townships, and that's why they've brought in the live streaming through BRL TV and the clubs paying for it themselves to get more advertisers on board. Sure. Is that something that Rugby League Ipswich are looking into?
Well, it would be a big step, so we would have to look at it carefully. We do video a lot of our games at the moment for a different reason, obviously, the judiciary and coach development, player development, referee development. Live streaming is another level again. The current investment in the videoing of the games is quite heavy on clubs at the moment. Ourselves tip in more than 50% of that cost as well to video those games, and we do that through all of our grades down to second division as well. So, Yeah, we would have to weigh up the pros and cons, and like you say, the benefits of that additional revenue stream of advertisers who enjoy, advertising in the online space is something we'd have to look at for sure.
Because I guess, like you said, having the dollars already invested in the video side, you're really just adding a couple of microphones and putting it on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. But you want to do it right. You want to deliver a good quality product so people are actually going to get bang for their buck. If a sponsor came along and wanted to shell out a few dollars, you want to make sure that you give them some sort of return, and that would rely on the quality of the product and the population. Who's going to watch it, who's going to view it. And I don't know what the BRL's experience in terms of downturn in gate takings and people staying home and watching the games, not coming to the games anymore. Our guys rely heavily on gate taking, so you want to weigh up the impacts that might have as well.
All right, now let's have a look at the competition results from the weekend. Bombers, some interesting results, and another draw. I guess we were talking last week about this game being very close, or it could have gone two ways. One is that Goodna could not have turned up and North's run away with it, but it looks like it was quite a battle.
Yeah, well, obviously probably the good thing, it was a home game for Goodna, and they always, like most clubs there, if you're playing at home, you're always a better chance. You always get the players turning up, you get the crowd turning up, so you're a better chance. Obviously North, they went down there and obviously didn't find them easy beats. Goodna didn't pack it in, but the game of the round was obviously the second versus third playoff there, which Swiss got away with.
Now, across the board in this round, there was a lot of high scoring games, a lot of points put on. Makes you a bit weary of defensive efforts when you see those results. But what was your game of the round?
Well, like I just mentioned, the game of the round was a battle for second position between Swiss and Brothers. Brothers were in there on for and against, so whoever won that game would move into second position there. And Brothers started full of running. They scored in the third minute. Swifts hit back with the next two tries after that, and then they led 10-6. But then Lawyer, the centre out there, who was probably one of Brothers' best players all day, and he's probably been one of their best players all year. He crossed for his second try, and Brothers were full of running there. They led, I think it was 16-10, and then they looked like they had scored another try, but a double movement was called, and then Swiss scored just before half time, so they went into the break 16-all. So.
That was very close, wasn't it? Very close to the sideline, but it was good to see that they got over. And like I said, the only question I had, and you saw it early with the passing early, where I guess in that stage of the game, look, it's funny, I'm a bit like you, David. I do like to critique the game, but I guess I wasn't a first grade player myself. But you don't want to really see that. You want to see them just running up. You just want them to be taking their sets and laying those foundations early.
Well, I think Coach Jason Connors would most certainly like to see that. Some of the plays, I've watched the Bitter Brothers this year, some of the plays they put on are really high risk, flick passes and chip kicks and this sort of stuff, and it probably gives Jason a lot of grey hairs. But, they're in the finals now, and that's a different competition. Swifts have had a tough year with injuries. They've had players come in and out. They had Javan White for half a dozen games, Izzy Afoka for half a dozen games. They really haven't had a settled squad. And I think they actually have one of Ipswich's most underrated players is Stephen O'Donoghue, coming into some form as well if he can stay injury free. So, they'll give it a real shake. And Brothers are always there or thereabouts, very experienced finals campaigners. Look, I'm really looking forward to the next few weeks involving these clubs.
And I guess, would you say with the big passing games and those sort of fast attacking plays is down to what's trickling down from the Ipswich Jets?
Oh, well, obviously Chris Ash, he was the halfback for Brothers for a majority of the first part of the season there. So, and he's got, as you know in the intro, he's got one of the best passing games in the competition. So yeah, it probably is there. Like I know some of the clubs do adopt some of the Jets things with the short kickoffs, but they obviously don't adopt all of it there because obviously they haven't got the structures to what the Ipswich Jets have. But the second half there, Brothers come out, they scored the first try, but then Brothers hit back with, Swiss hit back with the next two tries, and after 64 minutes, this game was locked up 24-all.
Well, that's right. In 24-all, it's high intensity, and it's, you're playing for your spot. I guess is it second chance? you know, it makes a...
That's Jesse Roberts there, actually,
A
going
good
over
try.
for a try from the Jets there. But just before the end of that game there, when it was 30-24, Brothers looked like a certain try, and Pio Secchi, obviously from the Jets there, the Fiji national, he was probably the try of the season, held him up right on the line. So, and that obviously got Swifts in the second position.
All right, now we'll have a look at the Eastern Cobras and West End game. Now this game, I guess, battle of the bottom spots, but I guess it's a great opportunity for coaches and players to, you know, try something new for next year.
Yeah, well, I was down at this game. It doesn't show on the video there, but it was cold. It was windy. It was, when the sun went down, the sun's just about to go down very, very shortly through this game, and it was terrible.
Ooh.
But
That's an interesting point, actually, Bob. It was a really difficult round of football for all of the teams, because at Swifts on Sunday there was a fire burning at Muttapilly and coming through Perga there, so they were concerned about the respiratory challenges they might face in the second half, where some of those players might have been affected by smoke inhalation. These guys here are playing in almost frost-like conditions. Yeah, it was a tough round conditions-wise, and it might have been why you saw a lot more points scored, because a bit tougher to defend when some of those things, Mother Nature's working against you.
I was going to say that when it probably hurts a bit more, especially in cold, when you're taking a hit up and you just want to get your legs running.
well, obviously West End must have been cold, because after 23 minutes they were down 22-0. This is obviously there's no footage there. There was a bit of a melee here, a couple of punches thrown between all of them there. 3 players were sent to the sin bin over that just to cool down. And like I said, West End were down 22-0, but then they fought back, and after 22 minutes of the second half, it was 26-all. So West End didn't chuck it in and fought, but obviously near the end of the game they obviously tied. It's happened all year for West End, so where they've just lacked at the finish.
I think it's just probably a bit of frustration, and the wind probably also plays a bit of impact. I know with kids, when it's high windy, that's when they're playing up a bit more. So, but
it was a challenge, like you said earlier, that those two teams with not a lot to play for actually used it around to, like West End was celebrating the reappointment of their coaches in Jay Woodward and Rob Hawkins, and then Eastern Cobras gave Johnny Leota the weekend off and used Morris Kemp, their coach from last year, as their first grade coach. So just trying a couple of different things and see how they might work into 2019.
and that was a bit of breaking news as well with Jay, and they get signed, which was really good to see for West End.
Yeah. Well, Jay's done a good job. I know that they finished with the wooden spoon, but Jay and Rob, their first year there, they've got a bunch of young ones there, and obviously we'll talk about it a little bit later what they need and all that. So.
Well, I guess I don't think in any competition that you could really have much change in 1 year, can you? Like, to be honest, it's not like you could start implementing stuff early, but it really takes you 2 or 3 years as a coach to have those systems in place.
You see that in the top levels of the game, don't you? It does take a little while, and talk of this week of Gus Gould's 5-year plan and these sort of things. It's not terribly different at the local level. You have to tell the players sometimes that we're on a 3-year journey here. We need to build something. We need to build it slowly, get foundations right, build up our skills, our stamina, etc., etc. And over time, perhaps if we stick together, success will come.
All right, now the other game was the draw between Goodna and Norse, 26-all. Interesting clash.
Yeah, well, again, like we said earlier there, with Goodna playing at home, they're always going to be competitive in their last game there. Norse-blooded young fella here, Nathan Stevenson, he got a run from the bench there. So obviously Norse have got a bunch of locals from their own side that have come through the grades, so it was good. It was obviously not the way Goodna wanted to play their last game of the season. They're the 2-time defending premiers there, but this is Kyle Blackman here. He's been a revelation for them this year there, and obviously he's got them a long way, and they'll rely heavily on him throughout the final series.
Plenty of speed there, and that's what you could say. Like, it's easy to turn around and say that's just a missed tackle or whatever, but those missed tackles from opportunities from speed, and was it
Something you can't coach.
That's right, you can't coach speed. So, but there's some more there. Like, just a lot of quick men in this competition, and it's really good to see.
Absolutely, a lot of skill. I mean, we may not talk about Fassifern today because they don't have a game this past round, but the Melanesian impact out there, Fijian, PNG, flair, skill, pace and brute strength, it just adds another level to our competition, and these guys here have to be really careful over the next few weeks when they come up against these guys from Fassifern.
Now, Norse obviously were going to finish fourth, win or lose. Was this a chance for them just to rest some players that had niggles?
Yeah, well, obviously they wanted a bit of a hit out because obviously with presentation like this week they have a week off, so they couldn't afford to rest too many players there. And obviously some of the forward, unless you've got an injury that's going to get worse there, obviously you want your forwards playing. So, but this was 16 all, got back to 16 all, and then it was seesawed from them, 22-16 back to 22 all, 26-22, and then it ended up 26 all. But it was a funny stat. They played, the last time they played down there, it was also a draw, so they had 2 draws. So
there you are. Well, that just throws my argument more so into having golden point.
Yeah.
But yeah, a good spectacle, and it's good to see.
We'll just put some heaters out though. If we're going to finish at 10:30 at night, we're going to need to keep our volunteers warm.
That's exactly right. All right, let's have a look at the competition ladder now. 2 weeks out, we've got like you mentioned, you got the week off for presentation night. Let the boys go have a good time. But it finished well. I think Eastern Cobras, there was a bit of a gap. We know that unlike the other 2 competitions, the top 4 was sort of sought in a sense that we knew who was going to be in the top 4. Position-wise, we're going to switch and change depending on results. But I guess it's still, it was a pretty good outcome for the competition.
Yeah, look, I think my organisation's really happy with how, like I say, all 3 of those competitions have played out. The player points index obviously has an impact on this A-grade competition for the last few years. It's kept things really, really even. What we want to do now is actually make the competition better. If everybody's even, let's make it now. If everybody feels the same and has the same abilities, now let's all just take it together to the next level. Yeah,
well, we did talk about West End there and how they've got a bright future. Obviously, you'd be happy with the Cobras too, back in competition there to finish 5th on the ladder there, and they lost about 4 games by under 6 points this year, so they could have been battling for there, and obviously with natural improvement and a few extra players in the off season, it'd be a disappointing season if they didn't make the top 4 next
Absolutely year. No shame in their results this year. They've both got very young player lists, and if they can keep those guys together, and like I say, with the reappointment of those coaches we touched on earlier, there's no reason why they can't. The only thing that might beat the West End Bulldogs and the Cobras is the development of those players to the next level. So if the Jets come looking for some of those young fellows, they may have to start again, but that's what we do. We're a nursery for the Ipswich Jets, so if we're doing our job well enough, we should be turning players over.
Yeah, but I guess that argument's for any competition. If you've got good players, they can easily go up. I mean, we've seen it again with players in BRL and even Sunshine Coast League as well, even though they have got the feed of Melbourne. But, I guess that's the downside of developing great players, that they can be taken away.
We see it at the highest level. There'll be a new Billy Slater next year, whether his name's Jerome Hughes or Cameron Munster, we've yet to find out, but that's what's exciting about our game. Excuse me, it just keeps turning up these superstars. So. All
right, we'll bring you the finals soon, but let's just get your thoughts on Eastern Cobras. We'll talk about the teams that didn't make the finals. So we'll start off with Eastern Cobras.
Well, like we just mentioned there, good season. I reckon it's a pass mark for them there. They lost, like I said, a few games by short margins there. They just didn't play out some games, which obviously did hurt them there. They had a bogey team in Brothers there. Obviously, they copped 2 really big touch-ups from Brothers, but they seem to be able to match all the other clubs for some reason. So obviously next year, with, like I said, natural improvement there with the players, if they keep hold of that same team there, they'll be a top 4 team next year for sure.
Now, obviously, West End Bulldogs as well, like you just mentioned, it's more of a developing year, and next year, hopefully, we could see him progress a little bit further up the ladder.
Yeah, well, having a bit to do with Johnny Cochran and Jay Woodward, I know they probably wouldn't be overly pleased with the result, but with a keen eye on the future, yeah, most definitely.
And obviously, I guess my opinion, we've already talked about it, but my opinion with Goodna Eagles, and this is outside looking in, so please excuse me, but it seemed like it was probably a bit of stubbornness, and I think it's something that maybe next year we could all learn from.
100%.
Just competition and the league and the team themselves. So we could probably manage it a bit better. So.
Yeah, and look, I probably should add there, Terry, our relationship that we enjoy with Goodna now is very strong. So it hasn't tainted the ability for the 2 parties to work together. It's ancient history. The season's done. We're both working together on 2019 already. So.
All right. Well. There's that time of the show. We'll have a look at this week's player profile.
My name's Tyson Hornbuckle. I'm 23 and I play for North Tigers. I started playing at Rosewood when I was 6. I've been playing here for about 3 seasons, I think. Yeah, 3 seasons, 2014. It's a great club. The culture here is probably the best I've ever been with, so yeah, that's why I stick around. I enjoyed my season up the road at the 20s Jets, but I haven't had any wins in the grand final, so. I think the captain, Chris Scanlon, he definitely is inspiring. He always talks and leads by example, so he's probably the inspiring player. In NRL, I always grew up, I like Darren Lockyer, just because he's a legend he is, but that's probably about it. Him and Corey Parker, just because Corey Parker's work ethic. To be honest, my mum wanted me to be tough, so she put me along to football. She said she wasn't going to have me playing soccer, so. I guess football's all about attitude, so as long as you work hard and just work for your goals, you'll get there in the end. You definitely got to look out for Josh Roberts. Not so much for his effort on the field, but more so in the dressing room. He gets a bit handsy, I guess. I'd just like to sort of stick around playing at Norse and just, yeah, spend some time with the boys. That's the reason why I play at the moment.
Thank you, Tyson, there from Norse Tigers. A bit like this show, actually. Bomber gets a bit handsy as well. Now, we'll be covering the presentation night next week's episode. Bomber, what's your prediction for Coach of the Year and A-grade Player of the Year?
Well, I'm not sure when the awards were actually are now. Well, they're announced this week when they were decided there. But if it's the Coach of the Year, mine is Ducky O'Donoghue from Swifts there. He got a side there that they've made the finals the last 2 years there, and he seemed to, he had a lot of injuries throughout the year. They had a bit of a lull there for a while there. They got beaten by the Cobras and all that there, but they finished in second position. So he's my prediction anyway. So
any A-grade player?
A-grade player, there's probably a few players. Fassifern have got the blend of Barvus or Lavini in the centres, but I think they might miss out because they've got too many stars. And obviously, when they do play well, this one gets 3, the different 3s every week. North's probably Sam Martin's going to be up there. He's led the aggression through the forward pack for him. But my tip is Lawyer, the centre for Brothers there. He's played good every game there, and when Brothers win, it's normally on the back of what he does. So.
All right. Now, David, I feel like as chairman, I already know what the answer's going to be here, but who's your coach and player?
I just wrote down some notes to see how close Anthony actually gets to what we'll vote on later, so it'll be interesting. There's been some really good coaches throughout all 3 grades. You know, Darryl Squires has led that Brothers side to a lot of wins this year. Chunky Brown's made some impact there at Swifts. Daniel Roos with the Fassifern side out there has probably, got a case as well. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where we go with that one.
So am I right? Is it Damien O'Donoghue?
He'd be in the top 12, I'd say. Yeah.
All right. What's your rep player of the year?
Well, the rep player of the year from our carnival there, obviously the A-grade side didn't perform up to scratch this year. We only got one player in, which was Ono from Goodna there, so obviously he's a chance. But our Colts, we had 4 players that did move on. We got the 3 from West End, obviously PJ, Sione and Lacity there, and then obviously the one from Goodna, AJ. So, but if I had to pick one of them, it'd probably be PJ Noski from West End there. He had a blinder of the carnival, and even talking, because I selected the side there, the ones from Brisbane and Gold Coast, they were just in raptures about he performed, and we didn't win it either, so we only just missed out. So.
And David, what's your predictions for the rep player of the year?
Oh, that's another tough one. Ono obviously has got the form on the board. He's played for the Rangers there a couple of times, so if no one's listening, it's hard to go past Ono.
All right. Now, what's your predictions for this year's presentation night? Let us know. Leave your comments below, and we'll have a look at them next week. Now, that's all the time we have for After the 80 Local Edition this week. As per usual, Bomber, Thank you for your time.
No, it's good to be on the show. I'd just like to give a couple of shout-outs there. Obviously, we've got a retirement in Josh Ryan from, like I said earlier, from Rosewood there. So obviously, good luck with him. He'd probably make a good coach, but I'd say he'll get back into married life there, probably go in the can bar. Under 19 player last week from Pascoe out there, got injured there, spinal injury. But the latest is that he has recovered and no surgery. Obviously, Jay Woodward and Rob have been reappointed, so that's good for West End. And a shout out to Sam Kruger, and his wife Dee, just had a baby during the week, Molly Rose. So congratulations to them too.
No sleep for you guys anymore. All right, and David, thank you very much for your time. Obviously, me pressing you a bit with some of the tough questions.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation.
All right. Now, if you'd like to join the discussion, you can follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Just search After the Addy TV, and you can also subscribe and download us as a video podcast on iTunes. I'm Terry Pascoe. Thank you for watching.